Brad, you're muted. Brad, much like our offensive tackles, unable to go right now. Get nothing. Browns lose, 27-10. Uninspiring, I suppose, effort. Although I guess some of that is the Browns have different goals than everybody else does at this point. The Browns are, as irritating as it might be to watch, they're sort of content with a lot of their roster, and they're messing around with a couple small things. For example, the Browns seem pretty happy with their corners, for large stretches of that game, they literally had their outside corners where two guys will never be on the field in Hardy and Tony Brown. The Jets made sure their depth chart was extremely talented last year, so that Justin Hardy, who is a fantastic special teamer, will never see the field as a corner. Tony Brown has been an awful corner in his career, so sort of get a little, I guess, disjointed look at what the Browns are actually doing. Makes it very easy to pass. Other things that were going on that sort of make this frustrating to watch is the Browns have done a really, really bad job of contain throughout the preseason, and it does raise some questions. For example, the Browns haven't done a very good job of defending bootlegs last year. But, I've always made fun of the fact that the Browns have used Elijah Moore on jet sweeps based on going against Jim Schwartz's defense because he's never stopped it. And you saw that even in this game. You saw a couple quick handoffs to wide receivers on the move that were able to gain yardage. And then you combine that with the fact that you can see why the Browns put a premium on speed at linebacker with JOK and why they wanted to get Jordan Hicks, because they have to fix when the D-line goes inside. And you have to have guys that have the range to get out there and cover it. Certainly a reason why a team like the Browns would take a look at a guy like Devin Bush. Diabate sort of got a little bit of that range. But when you get down to the Winston Reeds of the world, Winston Reed, who's a phenomenal player at Weber State, has no real speed. He's a between the tackles, downfield guy who's able to do that. So largely what you ended up with in this game was an evaluation, at least on the defensive side of the ball, continuing to look at defensive linemen, which is fine, and then trying to get some depth pieces in the mix. So anyway, with that, hopefully Brad's got the ability to talk at this point, but joining me and Brad, Casey Kinnaman and Sam Penix.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me? I'm back. Sorry about that. I'm not even going to explain it. Nobody cares. I'm back. So what's up? Browns dropped one. Pete, thanks for covering. 27-12 loss to the Vikings. Nobody cares about the score. Let's talk about the game. There's some interesting things to take away. Tough day at offensive line as the situation gets worser there. But there was some bright spots too. I thought a couple players here and there. Pete very much talking about, some good things on the defensive side of the ball. I thought some of the linebackers played well throughout the game. But let's go around and let's start with a positive, right? Let's try to remain positive here. This game was a weird one, as all of these are. But there were some interesting things to take away, but we'll get to that. Let's go around and tell me the most positive thing that you saw today, or your most positive takeaway from today's game, and we'll go right back to you, Pete, with this one, and you can let us know what your most positive takeaway from today's loss to the Vikings was.
The Browns have a ton of defensive line depth, with the one caveat, it's not necessarily at the spot they needed to be. So you saw a lot from Mike Hall. Mike Hall was very disruptive. Now, there are people who are probably going to complain, and I think rightfully so in some ways. He's getting into the backfield. You want him to get there in terms of getting to the ball more often, but he's consistently getting through the line of scrimmage. You saw a nice stunt where he was able to free up Isaiah Thomas on a sack. You saw Isaiah McGuire sort of create a sack that Chris Williams was able to clean up. And ultimately, the guy I'm really referring to in terms of finding more depth is Chris Williams. I don't think Chris Williams is going to make this team, but ultimately, the Browns are either going to be in a situation where another team is potentially going to call up the Browns and go, what can we give you? Probably a player or maybe a conditional pick and try to make a quick swap for him. But seeing more from Isaiah McGuire, seeing more from Isaiah Thomas, when the Browns don't have their front line or even their top 4 guys in this game, continues to show you things that they have, which are going in a positive direction. But, I add the caveat, we're still sitting there waiting for Siaki Ika to do much of anything, and Juwan Briggs is okay.
Yeah, along those that line of thinking, Pete, even the broadcast pointed out that Ika was in the game until the very, very end, when no one else that really is competing to make this roster was out there. Does that tell you where we are with him?
It might, but some of that is, I think it does ultimately, but I would say for a guy like him, he needs all the reps he can get anyway. But still, the thing I keep noticing with Siaki Ika is very quick off the draw, and then he stands up and he gets himself off balance, and guys are able to sort of tip him over. And that's ultimately where he runs into problems. When he can square up and just go forward, he's okay. But the second guys are able to get him going one way or the other, he has problems.
Safe to say that Chris Williams has outplayed him?
Sure, but again, I don't know what that really means since they play different positions. Like Chris Williams is an interior guy who's like more of a 3 and has been playing big end, which is kind of interesting. But, ultimately, the Browns need to find somebody who can do a little 2-gapping every now and again, because you can't just roll in with what the Browns hope will be Dalvin Tomlinson week 1. They aren't even sure they have him right now. So and this is something we've talked about all offseason was they got to find somebody else to 2-gap. They got to find somebody else to 2-gap, because what happens if Dalvin Tomlin goes down? Well, knee scope. And now we're sitting there looking, going, we need somebody to 2-gap at least a little bit, or 1-gap if it's Juwan Briggs. He's not a 2-gap guy, but if he can 1-gap effectively in as that nose, great.
Yeah. Interesting stuff there on the defensive line. Lots of depth, but still trying to kind of feel it out there. Let's go down to the one and only Casey Kinnaman. What's happening, Case Dog? What's your biggest positive takeaway from today's game?
Well, Pete touched on it. It's the defensive line depth. You got a bunch of guys really competing, probably for the practice squad, but that's how solid it is. And Pete's right. You might get a phone call and someone might be looking for a Jeremiah Martin. You might be able to unload Williams. Isaiah Thomas, once again, flashing again. So you have a lot of depth there. One thing that I will take away from the offensive side of the ball is the bottom of your wide receiver room is pretty fun. You got some guys that can actually make plays down there. And we've seen flashes from Jamari Thrash today. Unfortunate for the interception that DTR threw. It wasn't great placement. Thrash has to make that catch. And then that killed the momentum. You're really moving the ball there. And it kind of stalled what the only really momentum DTR was able to provide in that first half. Gets stalled right there, and he was never really able to get it back. But I just think you have a fun wide receiver room because, you sat 39 guys today. They listed 39 players that wouldn't play. Now, some of those guys weren't going to play anyway. Greg and Chubb were on that list. But I'm just saying those are the guys that are going to make your roster. And then there's all these guys are fighting for just a handful of spots. And I don't really think anything truly got decided today.
Interesting.
I would touch on the wide receiver room. I think they're trying to hide Matt Landers at this point. And I don't think I've said all along, I don't think Matt Landers is a guy you're going to keep on the roster.
No.
But I thought at some point this preseason, and maybe it's protection, they couldn't block anybody. I thought at some point they would just rear back and let him go chase one down. And he's barely been on the field. I think at this point, they're going, why even bother? Let's just try to get him to the practice squad.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that because you hear the buzz out of camp and you see some of the highlights and then you don't see any of it. Even the highlights you hear about, you don't even see, to your point, as much as some of the other ones coming out on social media. So maybe there's a campaign to hide Matt Landers. But I would make an argument, and we'll go to your next positive, Sam, and you see what you guys think about this. I would argue that the wide receiver room is set at 6.
Probably.
Anybody disagree with that?
It's definitely going to be 6. Do you think you've got it set for the 6? I mean, I'm pretty sure who it's going to be. Because I know the guy that everybody thinks there is one guy that people want to will into that 6th spot, and it just hasn't happened. At least, and again, it may be in practice. I've heard a lot of good things about him in practice, which is Michael Woods second. Big kid, like he's bigger than you think he is. Very good play strength. He can create separation down the field and enough speed where you're like, he's interesting. And maybe, but I know fans hate him for reasons that I will never understand. Because he's the greatest 4th down receiver in history, David Bell. But they like him. He just does his job. And look, there's an element of just being good at what you do. And although he doesn't get nearly the buzz because he's not exactly the most exciting playmaker, he's been all indications are he's had a really good camp. So yeah, he's never going to be exciting. But this is a fan base that loved one of the most athletically limited receivers NFL has ever seen. And that is largely what they want David Bell to be. So I know it's not sexy. Look, in the same way that you want Matt Landers, you just look at him, you're like, wow, he's huge and he can run really fast. Yeah. You want that guy to be successful. I'm with you, but the Browns really like David Bell, and I think ultimately that's where they're going to end up. Jamari Thrash has been a lock since he was drafted, basically, and he's done nothing to hurt that. No, but yeah, I think everybody's pretty set. And the top 4 receivers didn't even suit up, which is again good, very good. If you are Cedric Tillman, you are really happy right now. Not only are you obviously going to make this team, but they're trying to get you. They're looking at you for a role.
Yeah, and Thrash is the other one, and Bell's hurt with a thigh, but I think he's in. Casey, you want to put up a fight for your boy?
Yeah, I mean, I think old Mikey Trees is a very quarterback-friendly wide receiver. He uses his body well, gives his quarterback good options. But if you're going to be the 7th wide receiver, you have to be a huge plus in special teams. And I don't think we can say that about him.
I don't think we can either.
So
I don't think they're going beyond 6.
He was supposed to be coming out of college, and obviously last year he was out. So I don't think it's just really materialized at this point.
Yeah. Sam Penix, follow him on Twitter at Sam_Penix. What's happening, Sam? How you doing? I want to hear what your positive takeaway was from today's game.
Yeah, I think one of the things that jumped out to me was the 2 tight ends, Mitchell Payton and Welsh, were making some plays. I know Mitchell Payton went down at the end of the game, so we'll see what the status of that injury is, along with a bunch of other ones. But they both made some good catches. Their blocking was fine. I know that's kind of the more important factor for tight end 3 at this point, if you keep a tight end 3. At this current point, I would expect them to try to get both of them maybe on the practice squad, or at the very least one of them. But if they can show something over the last couple weeks of camp, next week maybe they'll force their way onto the roster. But at the very least, I think it was encouraging to see their performance today.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought they both played pretty well. I did think that Jordan Akins, in 2 games has looked better than we saw him all of last year as well, if we're on the position. And they did use him in run situations sometimes today as an inline guy. Not that he blocked very well when they did use him. But that makes me kind of think that Pete has been right all along, and they may just roll with 2 of them, push the other 2 through the practice squad, and then situationally throw your big, strong receivers at the position if you need to, or extra protection with your tackles.
Maybe that's one of the reasons that they like Tillman so much is he's kind of that bigger bodied guy who has a history of blocking fairly well for a receiver. So I think he could end up maybe covering up for, some of that slack of not having a third tight end.
Yeah. Something I've been worried about all of the offseason. Pete's been telling me not to worry, but
don't worry about it.
Here we are.
I think Cedric Tillman and David Bell are going to do tight end things. How you want to view that? In Aikens, look, they're not going to put their hand on the ground. But we saw last year that they used them to help pass protect and do some other things like that. So they had to do it last year to help a very bad offensive line. They did it. So you can do some of those things. And Cedric Tillman, I mean, I think if you watched him last year, you saw a guy who had like tight end play strength. And I don't want to get like out of control, but like he's difficult to tackle. You've got to like get in there and really you can't just sort of fling him to the ground. But yes, I think ultimately, and I think ZMP has gotten better. Like this is clearly the best he's been. And I like Trayton Welch, but I think the Browns are ultimately going to just, throw them both out there and basically do the math here that both of them are not going to get claimed. They're at least going to get one back. And even if there's some small margin of a chance that they do, and Ricci, I should add Ricci to this. None of these, like they're not all going to get claimed by another team. You're going to be able to get your guy. And if somehow, if some miracle, there's some team that go, oh, man, I need Giovanni Ricci on my team. I have to have ZMP. Then they are going to be able to find somebody else that can fulfill the role they need. Now, they would certainly prefer to be ZMP in particular, I think, and maybe Trayton Welch because they're sort of their guys that they're trying to groom to be into this role. But like at no point am I sitting here going, ZMP, that was a great play. And he had like 50-some yard receiving today, which is really good. Trayton Welch, a couple nice plays, but at no point am I going, we have to keep this guy on the roster. And I'll be honest, I don't think that with Aikens either, but the money sort of does that for it. Tight end for the Browns is David Njoku. If he's out, it's just more receivers.
Interesting. Love it. All right. The topic, we're going to get to some other takeaways, but I'm sure a lot of people want to talk about the offensive line and kind of where the Browns go from here. Today, they played James Hudson at right tackle and gave Ifedi and Adeniji reps at left tackle. I want to know if you thought either of them were better than James Hudson over there. And then in the end of the day, they're all injured. Now, how severely, I don't know, but it certainly puts the Browns in a weird situation where, when they brought Wills out onto the field the other day, he did like 5 pass pro drops and took off his brace and left the field. So it doesn't seem like he's right around the corner. Maybe he is, and I'm reading this wrong, but that would just be my read on the situation. And maybe he's going to be ready this week, but I would be shocked. Let's talk about, first of all, did you think that at left tackle, Sam, Adeniji or Ifedi is any better than James Hudson at left tackle?
I don't know that I would go that far, but I would say that I thought Hudson played better on the right side today than he did last week on the left. How much that really matters, I'm not exactly sure because ideally you don't ever want him seeing the field. But I think the way that I see their strategy on the backup linemen, especially the tackles, is they don't love what they have as far as backups. Like they saw what last year was like, and they know that both of these guys are injured, so they're aware of the whole situation, and they've brought in these 2 guys. I think Adeniji was a 3rd-round pick, and then Ifedi was a first rounder. So they're looking for these guys who have talent, are on the younger side. They just haven't figured it out yet, and they're hoping they can unlock that in order to find someone who's playable in a pinch. And unfortunately, both those guys go down today. Like that's gonna hurt their chances. We're not in a situation where we have a Chris Hubbard on the second string on the bench where like, okay, if one of the starters gets hurt, you're going to be mostly okay. It's going to be pretty destructive if either Wills or Conklin isn't able to go. And I think they know that. I just don't know how much they're really. I think they're probably concerned. It's just the fact that it's really difficult to find good backup offensive linemen, and there may not be all that much more that they're able to do at this point.
Yeah, Pete. I thought I saw you comment on this, but Hudson on the right side today. I'll say. Let me just preface this by
apologize to him.
Apologize to who?
You ripped him, and he was easily the best tackle on the field by far. Easily the best tackle. And I still don't think he's going to make the team if he's healthy. But he was easily Jermaine Ifedi can't play dead. He was awful. He was just atrocious. I would rather take Lorenzo Thompson over him easily. And Thompson doesn't have enough ass yet, but at least he gets in the way. There were multiple times it looked like Ifedi patted the guy in the butt as he ran by, like he had a vendetta against the quarterback. It was bad. Anyway, updating Adeniji, crutches, that ain't good. As is Ricci, and then James Hudson, of course, only a walking boot, so he will survive because he always does. But my whole thing all along. I thought the Browns were going to keep 3 tackles. I've never thought that they were going to keep all 4 like they did last year. I think they will figure it out. They went into the season expecting their 3 guys to be back, obviously, and then they took low-risk flyers on guys who they can cut without any guaranteed money attached. And Adeniji, who I thought was okay, not great, okay, but I think he's going to be out for a extensive amount of time the way he went down. And Ifedi, reasonable shot given he's a former first-round pick, but as I said, can't play dead. I like Lorenzo Thompson. I think he's a practice squad guy who just needs to get, thicken up. And then Roy Mbeketa, God bless him, he's trying. He's roster exempt, so it doesn't matter. But if the Browns were really in a situation where they have to get somebody, they would be picking up the phone and calling somebody like David Bakhtiari, and it won't be cheap. Bakhtiari will probably be convincing to come out, and the team doctors would have to approve it. I think that's the last line of defense. But as I wrote, and my belief is that Kevin Stefanski knows within reason, knows exactly when Jedrick Wills is going to be activated. And my assumption is it's going to be Monday or Tuesday, because he has committed to saying Deshaun Watson's going to play in Seattle. It would be malpractice to put him out there with anyone else at this point, even though you owe James Hudson an apology.
Why me? It's not like you said he was good either.
Relentlessly ripped him in print. Anyway, it's fine. Anyway, you can't be taken seriously and go, hey, our quarterback who's played 12 games in the past 2 years, yeah, we want him to get reps, and we're going to put him out with James Hudson protecting him, or Jermaine Ifedi, or Akeem Adeniji, or all 3 of them at the same time in their current state. Like, to me, that says, when, even though he's sort of playing coy with the media, and maybe he's frustrated, or maybe it's sort of a thing with the team doctors. I don't know. They've been super cautious with injuries all offseason. Myles Garrett was fine, and I get it. They slow played his hamstring. Jerry Jeudy was fine. They slow played his hamstring. DeJuan Jones was out for a substantial amount of time with the surgically repaired knee, and he seemed to be fine. Like, these are players who basically said, Jack Conklin said himself, cleared himself, is still not off the PUP list. Is that an injury situation, or are the Browns just doing everything they can to get these guys super healthy because they understand they can't afford it to put these guys in jeopardy. That has been my belief in Jedrick Wills. Is Jedrick Wills like Nick Chubb has been out there showing off for the media a little bit. Is that just not who Jed is? Or is it a situation where, to your point, they've only seen him the one time. That means he's just starting this. I have to believe that they think he's ready. Again, I don't think Kevin Stefanski is going to send out Deshaun Watson with anyone else protecting him other than those guys. They've got 3 weeks. This is like the prime time to activate these guys and get them going. To me, that's the thing that makes the most sense. And we can sort of end this thing, but we shall see. I'd be very surprised if anything else happens this week.
I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. And listen, apologies, James Hudson. I did rip you. Now, I did rip him at left tackle. His performance at left tackle so far has been atrocious. Can we not?
Good for you. He won you the Ravens game. Single-handedly. No one else did. It was just him.
That's just crazy talk.
Forget Deshaun Watson. That was the James Hudson game.
Yes, that was the James Hudson game. But either way, yeah, so he played better at right tackle, but who cares? We don't need anybody to play right tackle.
And that's ultimately the thing. Like, to Sam's point, it's a supply issue. There just aren't enough guys.
Yes.
Like, what's crazy is, like, I've looked at all these lofty rankings where the Browns are, like, rated 3rd or 5th in offensive line. I'm sitting there, man, they've got a lot to prove. But then I look down at these other teams just in this division, and you're like going, holy crap, like, Russell Wilson has already been killed multiple times in this preseason game against the Bills. Like the Ravens are changing 3 starters. And those are teams that prepared for this. There are a number of teams who have not. So it's like terrifyingly bad. The NFL's in a really sore spot. The other thing I would add onto this whole thing, I've seen this talked about, the idea that the Browns should trade for an offensive tackle. I have no interest in this because you're going to trade for a guy you're probably going to cut. Put garbage cans out there. I don't care, but don't give away assets for guys you're probably not going to keep unless it is a trade for your guy you aren't going to keep for a guy the Browns aren't going to keep or a conditional like 7th where it's the pick only stays if the guy is going to make the roster. But don't throw away assets on a guy you are not going to count on. If that's the case, then the Browns should have been sort of readier to go with a Bakhtiari or something. Now I say this, and there are 3 weeks to go. Like, as much as like this game is sort of a little bit of a whoa, this is really bad. I say this, I think we forget that after the Seattle game, there is a bye week. So they've got 3 weeks, which is a significant amount of time. But like, if Jed Wills is not activated this week, that time becomes very, very precious in a hurry.
Yeah. Casey, listen, I want to present this real quick. So the other night, so I've been assuming that they've been giving James Hudson all these reps at left tackle because that's who they thought their best backup left tackle was. Quincy threw this at me on the show the other night saying that this was more of a what's the wide receiver they kept trying to throw the ball to in the preseason all the time, and this is more of an Anthony Schwartz situation, and that Ifedi and Adeniji are better, and they feel more comfortable with them at tackle, and that Hudson is like the same thing they're doing with him as they did with Schwartz. They're just trying to give him every opportunity possible. That's not how I read it, but that's how he presented it. Anyways, how do you look at the tackle situation over there? Do you feel like Pete does, like that they know something we don't about Wills?
Well, if he doesn't get activated this week, my concern level is going to skyrocket. Before Pete listed the injuries, I would have said if you had to start someone at left tackle out of the available people, I would have said Adeniji because he can at least pass protect. But if he's on crutches, all your eggs are in the Jedrick Wills basket. And that alone scares me. Even when he's 100% healthy, that's not, and to Quincy's point, like, I get it at wide receiver, trying to give everyone, every possible opportunity to prove that he's worthy of making the 53. You do that at left tackle during a game where your quarterback can be hit, that doesn't make sense to me. During practice when the quarterbacks are protected, okay, you're seeing what he can handle. But to do that when the Bullets are live and that he's a liability, which if Eddie is too. Today it was just Olay, right around the edge. So yeah, the plan has to be Jedrick Wills. There's no other option currently on this roster. And given that he hasn't participated, given that he's just finally got out on the field in front of us, now maybe Stefanski does have a more definitive timeline that he was told by trainers, hey, he'll be ready by X date, just kind of hold it afloat until then. But even then, all our faith being in Jedrick Wills is a scary proposition.
I mean, he could go out there week one. They could be like, okay, he's ready. He could go out there week one and play one play and be like, he's not ready. I mean, I think we're in that range of outcomes now that it's so close to the season. Or am I over exaggerating the situation? You think that 3 weeks is plenty of time for him to get into game shape and be ready to go?
I think 3 weeks is a lot of time. And again, if you start losing it, it becomes very precious. But 3 weeks, like just thinking it out loud, that's September 8th is a long time away. The other thing I would note is if these guys are all injured, Jermaine Fetty, if he broke his hand, if Deniji has a high ankle or whatever, like Deniji did not look good, just the way he got folded up. They can all be put on IR, and you don't have to do the roster juggling you used to. So in some ways, this sort of lets you keep these guys through week 4 without any issue if they have longer term situations, which isn't terribly exciting, but at least sort of keeps them in sort of stasis while you search out for depth. So if you were to suffer an injury, at least you have somebody eventually coming around that you can play. Like, again, James Hudson, it's very easy to criticize him. He's not very good as a left tackle, but the Browns have won a lot of football games with James Hudson, as insane as that sounds. And Akeem Adeniji is, to Casey's point, decent at pass blocking, which ultimately is, I mean, that's enough to get by, which is what they were dealing with last year. I mean, is he going to be that much worse than Jaron Christian was as a pass protector? I doubt it. Christian was horrible too. So it's obviously a horrible scenario to think about, oh, we're just doing this again last year. But again, I think the Browns have, I should say hope, but I do think the Browns have provided enough reason to believe that they have super slow played this thing to get these guys healthy as possible, because you lost all of them. So you've got to do as much as you can to safeguard that outcome.
Interesting. You're watching the post-game show. Browns drop one, preseason game 2, 27-12 to the Vikings. They lose the turnover battle 3-0. I'll say that I guess I thought that Deontay Foreman was a positive today. I kind of liked what he did catching the ball out of the backfield. I didn't really know he had that aspect of his game. He got upfield quickly. He runs hard. Poor blocking down on the goal line. He still found a way to get in. So I thought Foreman was a positive for sure. And, I mean, let me ask you guys this. If it was Ford, do you think that he threatens, Ford's touches at all before Chubb returns?
I think he's just a compliment to Ford. I think that's the way they look at him. I don't think that, if you've seen his usage in Carolina when Deuce was his running back coach, they did feed him. And he was pretty good in the games in which he got the ball. I think it was over 16 times or something. He was getting over 80 yards. He gets stronger as the game goes. Yeah. But I think the Browns just believe in Jerome Ford, and they're going to use Foreman as just a supplemental piece to do short yardage stuff and maybe spell for an occasional drive or two throughout a game.
Sam?
Yeah, I think I would agree for the most part. Like Casey said, every time he's gotten the opportunity, he's found success. Like, he's a good NFL running back, and he does have the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield a little bit, in addition to his strong suit, which is just continually punishing defenders and getting extra yards after contact. And I think that's a very valuable skill set to have, and I think he's going to be an effective player for the Browns, and I think it's in their best interest to kind of divide the touches up a little bit, because he brings a different dimension than what Ford does. I think like Ford is going to get you those big plays because he has that burst ability, as we saw multiple times last year. But Foreman is going to be the more consistent player where he's going to go forward more than he's going to go north or east and west. And sometimes you just need that, especially fourth quarter of games. Like, Nick Chubb has always been the elite closer, but I think if the Browns are ahead early in the season before Chubb is back, and maybe even when Chubb is back, if Foreman stays on the roster, I think Foreman could get the bulk of the touches later on in the game if they're just trying to burn the clock.
Yeah. Pete?
I think D'Onta Foreman, with the caveat that I appreciate how much pain Kareem Hunt played through last year, he's just way better. He's just significantly better. The passing game element, he's not quite as skilled as Hunt was as a pass catcher, but he was really good with the ball in his hands, and he's a better hammer. I also the other part is I think he's a governor for Jerome Ford. Every time Jerome Ford doesn't get behind his pads, or every time he does some weird cutesy thing, like Deuce Staley's not going to mess around. That's not how he is. I think it's going to put Foreman back in the game. But it also, look, Ford's just not a 20-touch guy. He's really explosive. He can do a lot of really cool things, both in the run and the passing game. But he's got to be more consistent. And he's probably, well-suited until Chubb gets back to get like 7 to 10 touches, maybe 15 if he's got the hot hand. But like, even, you take the game like the Ravens where he ran behind the obviously great blocking of James Hudson III. And you see that, but you couldn't bottle it. There were too many games where it was sort of inconsistent. And yes, I think the offensive line deteriorating hurt him, but he's got to show that consistency. I see a ton of talent in Ford, but again, every time I think Deuce Staley's the right running backs coach for him, and that he can basically every time he sees him do something like stupid in terms of trying to go around a corner as opposed to go through him and those types of stuff, he's just immediately Foreman go in. And I think that's a good setup. I really like the D'Onta Foreman signing. Obviously, the next situation was terrifying, but I think you saw everything that the Browns see when they get him. Now, they've got to run block better, but like D'Onta Foreman, if you don't run block for him, he's going to run block for himself, and your back is going to suffer for it, so you better run block.
Good stuff. Let's go around quickly here and tell me your biggest concern at this point. So the Browns are going out to Seattle. I mean, besides tackle, okay? Let's just get rid of the tackle. We've already hashed that out. The Browns are going out to Seattle in the weirdest preseason game ever. They're playing a 7 p.m. local time game. It's really weird, 10 p.m. We'll be here next week, by the way, for the postgame show if you're up. But what's your biggest concern going into this? What would be your dress rehearsal week, right? We've already said Deshaun's going to play. I would assume all the starters are going to be out there for a couple series, maybe at least one series. As you go into this week, what's your biggest concern, Casey?
It's health.
Besides tackle.
It's health. Period. Point blank. It's health. This team has just been snake bit, and they need to catch a good run. You need to go be as healthy as humanly possible going into the season. And we're still dealing with injuries that occurred last year that have bled over into the year. So getting those guys back, getting Jed back, getting Conklin back, those would be huge steps. I think Chubb will come back sooner rather than later? I do. But he's not going to be there week one. So you need to not suffer any more setbacks going into that game. And I hate to harp on the tackle situation, but that's what's hanging over you is the health. And then you got Micah Parsons waiting on you in 3 weeks. Now, 3 weeks is enough time to figure some things out, but you can't forget Bill Callahan's no longer here. You got to figure this out with Dickerson, and you guys got to be able to supplement if you can't get the right people on the field. So I don't know what it looks like if you're not healthy, if you don't get Wills back. And I don't even know what it looks like if you get Wills back. So right. For me, it's just health.
Sam?
Yeah, health is a big one. I think the gelling of the healthy offensive line is another thing because they've got to be able to pass protect, but they have to be able to block for the run, especially because you don't have like Chubb is like he's elite in spite of the offensive line, right?
Right. Yeah.
The other guys don't have that level of talent. And if your running game is going to succeed, they have to be better than what we've seen, even from the starters so far this preseason. I would say another one is just the meshing of the new offensive scheme. There's been some growing pains. I know the quarterback in the interview today, he said he was really excited to play in the new scheme. And I think it's going to be good for a lot of the players on the team. But again, like most of these guys are really used to something very different in Stefanski's system. And it's just going to take some time. Like the starters haven't played really much at all. And some of them haven't seen the field at all this preseason. So it's going to take some time to really get a feel for how that looks in a game situation against another team. So that's something I'm looking forward to seeing next week. And then on defense, I think it's got to be just the perpetual inability to defend the jet sweep. Like, I don't know what they're going to do with that, but it never goes away.
So true. Pete, your biggest concern going into dress rehearsal week here?
It's the running game as a whole. I mean, even, I like the fact that we're seeing a whole lot of the two rookies, Javion Cohen and Zach Sinter. I like the fact that they're getting a ton of reps. I like the Zach Johnson kid at center. Like, he's intriguing to me. I like Lorenzo Thompson. And so I can sort of excuse some of that in the preseason. But even the joint practices, the Browns running game was not good. And they had Bitonio, Osick, Teller, and at least DeJuan Jones. So how much of that is left tackle? It could be a significant factor. But, coming off of last season, I had, the big question beyond just getting his knee healthy was DeJuan Jones going to be able to be a good run blocker? Joe Bitonio obviously had an injury marred last year. He played through a whole lot of pain, had surgery during the season. He's got to be able to be back. I think that would be a huge boost for them. Wyatt Teller, I will continue to say he's the most important offensive lineman for this year, because I think the running scheme is going to cater to what he does more than it has in every other year. And is Ethan Posick really a good center, or is he just sort of a pretty good center who's sort of carried by having really good guards around him? Beyond that, obviously we already addressed the Foreman thing. He looked good. I think that's part of the reason he got so many reps, because he had missed time, even though that was a little terrifying to see how many reps he got. Nyheim Hines still has not been activated, and I don't know he's going to be a factor in the running game all that much, but he is a running back that's going to be part of this. So, without those guys, you've been largely running, and Nick Chubb's situation, obviously a mystery at this point. So largely for most of camp, you have been working with Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong, who continues to show me nothing, and John Kelly, who they had to cut who's now a Raven, because they had to go fill in for these injuries. The other guy I'm intrigued by is Aiden Robbins, simply because he seems to put his helmet into defenders' chests at 240 pounds, which is really entertaining to watch. But there's nothing there where I've sit there and go, oh, that's a really good concept, or they really executed that well. Largely in this game, it was Dante Foreman ran through people, or Aiden Robbins just put his got behind his pads and drove through people. But there have not been many running lanes, and that has impacted some of their play action passing game and some of the stuff with some of those sacks, but you don't have to take it seriously. And some of that, I suppose I can excuse a very small amount of that in just that's what the Vikings scheme does. They're always going to send dudes and potentially get you going off the, off those type of stretch boot action things. But still, you cannot go through another season where we're sitting there going, they cannot run the ball. They're expecting to throw their way through it. Prime example, they couldn't get out of the fourth quarter of this game. They were trying to get out of it and couldn't run the ball. So, I mean, that is the lingering issue on the offensive side of the ball. Defense, I'm not as concerned. They're good. Yes, we've got to figure out the slot corner situation and those type of things, and some end of the roster type, which is largely special teams. But the Browns are really talented. So that part, they should be good. But it's all about the offense. It's all about getting them, to Casey's point, the missing pieces. Even Jerry Jeudy, who by all accounts looks very good, had missed a bunch of times. So we're sort of getting him now integrated. So there's a lot that we're sort of taking on. I don't even know if it's faith, but just sort of like going, again, 3 weeks, we got to get these guys up and running. We got to get going because, is it going to be a 7-6 football game against the Dallas Cowboys? Is it going to be like DTR was against the Steelers? I certainly hope not.
Yeah, me too. All right. So we've gone through positive, negatives. We've talked about the tackles. We've talked about our biggest concern going into dress rehearsal. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you're tuning in to the post-game show right now. And the notification bell so you know every time we go live. We've got a show every night of the week now here at the OBR. And make sure you read everything at the OBR. We've got you covered 24/7 over at theobr.com. We'll leave on this tonight. Give me just an individual that maybe stood out to you that we haven't talked about that you really liked what you saw, or somebody you thought that raised their stock some today from what you saw. I know it was kind of a mush fest out there, but there was a couple guys that shined through. So we'll start with you, Casey. Who shined for you today that you were impressed with that we haven't already talked about?
Chase Williams. He was all over the field, making plays, high energy, bringing physicality. Looked good in some of the pass pro sets he got caught in, and he just got here. You had Brady Breeze, who was all over the field last week, so kind of just steps into that same role and did almost the exact same thing. I'll have to see the stats to see how many tackles he racked up, but he's all over the field flying around, and he's at best vying for a practice squad and maybe not even here. But it just, when players get opportunities like that and they make the most of them and they flash, it was impossible not to notice him because of how he was flying around. So that'd be someone I would point out.
Sam?
Yeah, I think Devin Bush looked good again. In his, did I take yours? He's
yeah.
It's you got to be careful not to expect too much of him because I don't think they're expecting him to suddenly become the top 10 draft pick that he was taken to be. But in a specific role on this team, I think he can find some success because he still does have that good athletic ability with the closeout speed. And I think if he's able to be in a situation where that's his role and he can just consistently do that and not be expected to drop back into coverage and be Fred Warner, then I think he can find success. And then the other one was the old new addition, Nick Harris. I think played well in his limited snaps, and I think they're probably a lot more comfortable with him as the backup over Luke Whippler, even if I like Whippler. I think he's going to be a good player, but he's not proven at this point. They know exactly what they have in Harris, and I think they're happy that he's going to be the backup.
Good stuff. Pete, got any names you want to throw at us that you felt like improved their stock today?
The best linebacker on this team that's not a starter to me right now is Mahmoud Diabate. Diabate has speed and seems to have a good ability to navigate through the trash to make it like one or a few impressive plays a game. I want to see more, but I continue to like him. But ultimately, I'm going to keep buying DTR stock. DTR is really good. Offensive line was a mess. Took a horrendous sack that could have, was close to a safety. But hit the only pass he really missed was the pick. It needed to be further out. But other than that, arm strength, accuracy, his ability to sort of search the field and work, he's really decisive. And he threw, that one pass to Jamari Thrash was a reckless throw, had no business going there, but he managed, it was accurate enough he could fit it. So,
yeah.
I continue to want to, I continue to enjoy what I see from DTR for a guy who missed so much time in the offseason with the hip. I think he's just going to continue to get better and better. So, and I'm going to hope, just as I hoped last year, that once the preseason is over, I put DTR on a shelf over here and I go, I will see you next year. please allow this to happen for me so we don't have to see him in the regular season again. But I really like what the skill set he has. I'm hoping that I really like what James Winston's brought to this team, but I'm hoping with another year the DTR is going to be sort of ready to take the long-term backup job. And I'm going to continue to believe until he can't that he could be a starter down the road. Does that mean a high-end starter? I don't know. But in terms of skill set, you need arm, accuracy, mobility, just being smart, understanding what he's looking at. I think DTR does a lot of good things. I have loved the pick since it was made. I love the fact he's with Kevin Stefanski and continues to work with these guys. He really seems to understand what Dorsey's offense is asking him to do as well. So
yeah,
I'm going to keep buying as much DTR stock as I can get.
Yeah, he makes for the most part, and of course we haven't seen extended looks at it with the starters or anything like that, but I mean, DTR makes the offense look like it kind of is working at times, right? Like,
Giovanni Ricci looked like a stud.
Yeah,
He's throwing to guys you don't think about. Like last week,
yeah.
Obviously this week you're sitting there going, maybe it's time for Amarian Brown to bring his playbook. But like last week, you're going, hey, Amarian, he's making plays because DTR is a guy who elevates the talent around him and makes guys better. And like, you're always looking for who's that next story, who's the guy they're going to keep around. Chances are they're catching balls from DTR because DTR puts guys in position to make plays.
Yeah, I was impressed for sure. I will bring up, last thing I'll bring up here, my person, I was going to mention both Diabate and Devin Bush. I thought they both played well, if you're looking at depth linebacker. But if we look at cornerback, because I continue to believe that Newsom's not going to be ready for week 1, probably. Mitchell got to turn around and find the ball. He didn't have a great day today. I thought Halasi had a much better game than he did in the first preseason game. I thought he made a really nice play today. Yeah. And I thought Miles Harden, who, not so much in coverage, but as a willing tackler, was not as good as he was in the first week. So, it's kind of a bunch of guys there, right? And we think Cam Mitchell's probably easily the guy that would be starting. But, if in the race between Halasi and Miles Harden, I thought Halasi had the better day today. Any thoughts on that from you guys?
No, I think it's pretty clear cut. And most of my complaints with the defensive backs is typically just not getting your head around. They'll be in position and not even realize it because they're not locating the ball. Yeah. It's like that first play to Mitchell. Just if you locate ball there, that's your ball instead of Naylor's. But no, that's how I read it too. Halasi had a really good day. I still think it's Mitchell's job to lose, and it's obviously in the slot. Harden is fun, but I think you might want to let him get a little more season to him before you put him in the fire. But I keep falling back to because last year it was even split 5-5 safety to cornerback. I don't know if you get that this year. I think it could be 6-4.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see how it happens. See what they do with Bell being hurt. I don't know how it's going to play out. This last week might have a lot to do with it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they keep 6 cornerbacks.
Harden can theoretically blur that line between corner and safety, but the bigger question for there is because I don't think Halasi's going to. Maybe he can be on kickoff, just the way the rules have changed. But he's not a guy that you're going to put him on punt. That's not what he does. He's a press guy with reasonable agility. How much is Harden able to contribute on special teams? That's a huge key for him because, he obviously got, I don't know whose coverage it was, but he undercut the throw that got beat for the 71-yard touchdown. But, allegedly has been crushing it in camp. So one of these things where what we see in the preseason may not be sort of indicative of what we're seeing, what the team thinks. And you get that one bad play and you're going, oh man, that's it. They've got a lot of guys to work through. I mean, the fact that they are potentially in a difficult decision is probably a good thing. They're difficult in the right ways, as opposed to maybe we need to haul trash cans out for practice at tackle. Certainly a better situation. So, I like what Harden can bring. It really just comes down to I think it may come down to where do they feel like they need more help They feel like they need more
Yeah.
slot help, or they feel good about that and they want to get somebody who can help you on the boundary. And Cameron Mitchell theoretically can do both, but I assume based on the Newsome situation, they basically said you have to get every rep possible in the slot because we need you to be good there now.
Agreed. Sam, thoughts on how this cornerback room looks and maybe shakes out for you?
Yeah, I agree with what Pete and Casey were saying. I think, like, especially last week, I think that a strategy that teams tend to use in the preseason, especially on defense in the secondary, is they're going to put these guys in situations that maybe they wouldn't necessarily want them in the regular season.
Yeah.
I know, Brad, you were talking about it earlier as far as James Hudson being the Anthony Schwartz situation where they're just trying to give him opportunities. And I think something similar happens on defense, especially with corners. Like, you're not going to – if Halasi plays in the regular season for some reason, he's not going to be outside one-on-one in press coverage. Like, it's just never going to happen because they know he's not that kind of player, at least not right now. But they're going to let him do that in the preseason because it doesn't matter, and you're not going to be able to improve at something if you've never gotten the chance to do it. So they're going to have these situations where some of these players are going to make these big mistakes that lead to these big coverage busts. And it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, this player is horrendous and they need to cut him right away. It just means the coaching staff is putting them in a position that maybe they're not super experienced or ready for because that's
they're challenging them. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's something that they want to do in the cornerback room because they have these young guys who, unfortunately, because of injuries, some of them are going to be thrust into roles earlier than the team would have liked, and they just need to see what these guys can do and where they are at in their development in these different situations.
All right, Sam, we're at an hour now. I'm coming right back to you. I just final thoughts. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? 27-12 loss to the Vikings. Score means nothing, people. Preseason game 2 in the books. One more to go. Dress rehearsal out in Seattle. 7 o'clock local time, 10 p.m. Eastern. Next Saturday. Sam, we'll have a week's worth of shows and content. Keep it locked at the OBR. But Sam, any last thoughts here as we go around one more time?
Yeah, I mean, the starters are going to have to bring their A game and show that they're ready next week. I think a lot of the depth positions are mostly solidified at this point. So, there's going to be some backups who are fighting for jobs in other teams. This is their chance to show it. But the starters who are going to play, like, they gotta get ready. They got to show that they're able to take these next 3 weeks after next week, the next couple of weeks to show that, like, they're ready for week 1 because that's when everything starts. That's when it begins to matter. And we just need to see, like, they're prepared.
Yeah. Casey?
My dream of trading Snoop Huntley for an asset is diminishing by the game. I think right now I feel like it's down to the Los Angeles Chargers. I need Greg Roman to get sick of Easton Stick real quick and bring Snoop in and get an asset. That's what I'll walk away with.
Yeah, not great from Snoop out there. Pete, final thoughts. Penny for your thoughts as we depart here into dress rehearsal week.
Cade York continues to increase his stock. What's really entertaining about Cade York is he stands 2 steps away from the ball and just boots it. Meanwhile, the guy on the other team is like 5 steps back with a running start and goes. Cade York's been making his field goals. Easy leg strength. I continue to believe that touchbacks are going to be super valuable. Since the point of the NFL changing the rules is to try to get the other team to score or have big plays. Special teams is now becoming a don't screw it up type element to the game. Cade York can punch it out of the back of the end zone. I'm very curious to see if they can try to get something for him, if somebody's going to bet on his talent and feel better about him based on what he's been doing. Difficult to say. If all fails, get him back to the practice squad, but like it's trending in a better direction with the caveat. Obviously, well, it's not pressure's on. Well, Last time he was with the Browns in the preseason, he was awful. So he's been effective, and that's certainly useful in terms of finding more ways to try to either get players back or future draft assets, whatever.
Listen, there's this week. We keep saying, 3 weeks? So it's this week. It's really like 2 weeks, isn't it?
There's
3 weeks
this
from
week?
tomorrow's the game.
2 weeks from tomorrow.
No, 3 weeks from tomorrow. You have an off week after next Saturday night's game, a buffer
Right.
week.
Yeah. Okay.
And at that point, so after the game,
Yeah. So 3 weeks.
after the game, they will do waivers, and everybody will do the cut down day. Then everybody will do the waiver claims to then do the cut down day again, the second wave, which is when the Browns got Khalif Halassi last year, and then they will have 2 weeks from that point to get going and ready for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes. So I would just say this, going into this week, it feels like there's been pieces and parts in practice, even at the joint practices there. Like some days Judy's there, some days he's not, some days this guy's there, some days he's not. I feel like, at least especially on the offensive side, there needs to be like a push or an effort to make sure that all the pass catchers are out there with Watson and really try to get this thing to gel before you go into live action on TV, in front of your fan base, even if it's for as little as that matters. That should be the goal this week, is to try to refine some of this, of what we've, heard reports of the clunkiness, right? But now is when you make that push to refine some of this, and hopefully it looks better. But it can't happen if it's always one guy out, one guy in. They all need to be there. They all need to be working on it for the next 3 weeks for this to become an offense that we can feel good about, I think, come week 1.
I feel like we're not going to feel good about it for the first few weeks.
Well,
I think the defense is going to have to carry you across those first few weeks, man. I'll be happy if we can feel good about that offense by the time we go to Philly in week 6.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I don't know about that. I think they can pull it together. I think, but I think that there needs to be a concerted effort to make sure that they are kind of moving. Go ahead, Pete.
Well, I was just saying the Browns got a lot out of very little offensively last year at the end when they had to. They've got time to prepare for it. The other thing that's sort of throwaway, a very happy Nick Chubb being interviewed on the sideline. I don't know what that means. I'm not suggesting anything. I just thought it was interesting that he was very happy. 2, he was being interviewed at all. And 3, it was this week. Now, we'll see. But it's just curious that the Browns made that choice. They didn't have to let him do it. It's obviously they make the deal to do the broadcast, so they would have say on this. Just something that was interesting. He was a very happy man out there, excited for the offense, but claimed he was already back to squatting whatever his normal weight was, which I wish he would stop doing, because God, I hate the idea of putting like 800 pounds on his knees. But nevertheless, all smiles. So we shall see what that means for him. Who knows? Maybe it's Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin, and Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen him that happy. He was like almost giggling. It was wild. So
happier there than when he got a contract extension.
Yeah, seriously. All right, good stuff, guys. Casey Kinnaman, follow him on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Casey_Kinnaman. Sam Penix, fantastic, at Sam_Penix, and the always great Pete Smith, at _Pete Smith_. My name is Brad Ward. Keep it locked at the OBR. We got you covered 24/7, wall-to-wall Browns coverage. You know how we do it. And we will have it completely locked in for you as we get you ready for preseason game number 3. And with that, we're going to get out of here. Hope you enjoyed the post-game show. Hit like, unsubscribe on your way out. We are out.